We're going to start today with a quote from an author named William James. What is life but a series of mental attitudes? Now that might sound like a bit of a weird question to start a philosophy video with, but bear with me because there are some pretty interesting ideas that come out of this. First, he's not saying that if you have positive thoughts, your life will be positive, and if you have negative thoughts, your life will be negative. He's actually talking about how our brain is basically constantly telling us a story about reality. And that story can go in all different directions depending on what we pay attention to and how we choose to interpret the things that happen to us. So for example, let's say you walk outside and it starts raining. So then you run inside to take cover and dry off. Well, your brain is probably going to tell a story about that experience. It's going to say something like, gosh, it was a beautiful day until it started raining. You were just walking around enjoying yourself until you got caught in the rain. Now you're soaked and cold and uncomfortable. But that same exact scenario could easily be interpreted in a completely different way. Like your brain could also say, wow, look at that amazing thunderstorm. You can really feel alive when you get caught in the rain. That must feel so refreshing after a hot day. Now you get to dry off, put on a clean shirt, and get some hot chocolate. See, it's the same exact scenario. All we've done is change the story that we're telling ourselves about it. Now, obviously, there is a difference between a hot day where it feels nice to get rained on and a cold day where it feels awful to get rained on. But even still, our interpretation of those events doesn't change the way they actually impact us. If we choose to focus on the negative aspects of getting wet in the rain, then we're going to feel worse. But if we focus on the more positive aspects of it, then we're going to feel better. And that brings us to our first existential question of the day, which is, what is the story that you're telling yourself about your life? Because think about it, your life can be summarized as nothing more than a series of experiences and emotions. It's really all it is. It's just one thing happens, then another thing happens, then another thing happens, and you feel happy, sad, angry, excited, whatever. So what exactly is connecting all of those dots? What is turning a series of isolated events into the life that you know and recognize? The answer is your brain. Your brain is weaving all of those disparate events together with meaning and significance by telling you a story about them. So let's go back to the whole example of getting caught in the rain. Let's say that you're having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. You're running late, you spilled coffee down your shirt, locked your keys in the car, and now you're getting drenched in a torrential downpour. At that point, most people would just give up. They'd stop trying to fight against their bad luck, and they'd just go with it. They'd say to themselves, you know what? Today just blows. Might as well get used to being wet. On the other hand, someone who's always looking for the silver lining might say, hey, at least I'm getting washed. This rain is probably doing my plants some good. Okay, maybe that second example isn't the best. My point is that we can react in drastically different ways to the exact same situation simply by changing the story that we tell ourselves about it. In the first case, the person is seeing their bad day as being caused by bad luck. And in the second case, the person is seeing their bad day as being caused by good fortune. We can apply this same kind of thinking to everything that happens to us. We can choose to see ourselves as victims of circumstance, or we can choose to see ourselves as the authors of our own lives. We can choose to see ourselves as being controlled by outside forces beyond our control. Or we can choose to see ourselves as the puppet masters, pulling the strings. We can see ourselves as helpless babies, or we can see ourselves as powerful creators. And the crazy thing is, none of those perspectives are inherently right or wrong. Each of them can lead to a fulfilling life or a miserable life. It all depends on what kind of story we tell ourselves about them. The challenge is that most of us don't realize that we constantly narrating our own life stories, so we end up just letting our subconscious minds do it without even realizing. What ends up happening is that we end up stuck in these negative thought loops. Like, let's say you're worried about the future. Your brain might say something like, oh, you're worrying about the future. The future is uncertain. The future is scary. You should probably worry more about the future. The future is unpredictable. It's hard to know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe you should prepare for every possible outcome just in case. And before you know it, you've convinced yourself that you need to spend every waking moment of your life worrying about all the things that could go wrong. Now, obviously, it's not super productive to spend all of your time worrying about the future, so eventually you try to stop. You try to convince yourself that everything's going to be fine. But then your brain says, wait a minute, you shouldn't worry about the future. You should be optimistic. People who worry about the future are pessimistic. Pessimists are losers. If you're a pessimist, then you'll never achieve your goals. You have to believe that you'll succeed. And then suddenly you've convinced yourself that you can never be happy unless you 100% confident that everything's gone, work out perfectly. Now, the problem here is that you can't actually be 100% confident that everything's gone, work out perfectly, because the future is inherently uncertain. There will always be things that you can't predict or control. So the only thing that you have control over is the story that you tell yourself about the future. You can choose to see the uncertainty of the future as being scary, or you can choose to see it as being exciting. You can choose to see yourself as being helpless in the face of fate, or you can choose to see yourself as the master of your own destiny. Ultimately, the choice is yours. Which brings us to our next existential question, which is, why is it so difficult to change the story that we're telling ourselves? Why is it so difficult to stop being our own worst enemy? Well, the answer to that question is twofold. On the one hand, it's because our brains are wired to look for patterns. It's literally what we're designed to do. Think about it. If you showed a monkey a picture of a banana and then hid the banana behind a bush, the monkey would probably assume that the banana was still there, because monkeys naturally assume that inanimate objects don't just disappear out of thin air. In fact, humans used to have much higher rates of dementia because of how unreliable our technology was. Nowadays, our smartphones and GPS systems and Google searches and everything else give us the illusion that nothing can ever be lost, because everything is backed up online somewhere. So nowadays, our brains are untrained to look for patterns nearly as much as they used to be, which makes it harder for us to break old habits and form new ones. But on the other hand, the reason that it's so difficult to change the story that we're retelling ourselves is also because we do and want to change that story. Most of the stories that we tell ourselves are stories that we've been telling for years, even decades. These stories are deeply ingrained in our subconscious minds, and they're comfortable. Even if the story that we're telling ourselves is a negative story, it's still a story that we're used to. It's a story that we know well, and change is scary. It's scary because we don't know what to expect. It's scary because we don't know how to navigate the unfamiliar territory. It's scary because we're afraid that we'll make mistakes. But the truth is that fear of the unknown is only natural. What's difficult is learning how to overcome that fear. Ultimately, though, that is what it takes to live the life that you want to live. It takes courage to break free of the old patterns and create new ones. It takes courage to admit that you've been telling yourself the wrong story, and that it is time to tell yourself the right one. But the good news is that it's definitely worth it. Because think about what happens when you finally do break free of those old thought patterns and you start telling yourself a new story. You start to notice that you feel better. You start to notice that the world around you seems brighter and more colorful. And you start to feel like you're actually in control of your life for once. And that feeling is pure freedom. It's the feeling of being truly alive. And that, my friends, is a feeling that's worth fighting for. Join us for more content like this.